Welcome everyone. We're talking about staking today and especially minimizing risks in staking. I have invited a great panel and let's go through introductions, and everyone at the beginning will explain one important term to understand staking. Because I don't know where you all stand. Some of you might just be interested in hearing more about staking. Some of you might be experts and wanted to learn more about specific risks. We're here for both of you. And I would ask, if you have any questions that are important to the moment, just jump in and ask. And if there are more general questions that don't fit the moment, we also have a few more Q&A minutes planned at the end. My name is Markus Perdrizat, and I've been in crypto, security and products for 9 years professionally by now, helping protocols and banks and startups figure out the right way forward in getting crypto business models together in a regulated way, making sure things are safe, things are scalable, and that there's a proper product in place. Good, let me get started. Ioannis, introduce yourself and help people understand what is staking actually.
Hello everyone, I'm Ioannis. I'm a senior engineer at Chain Security. So Chain Security is a smart contract auditing firm. We are actually one of the OGs. We've been auditing smart contracts since 2017, and we've been auditing like the blue chips of the DeFi world, from Lido, Maker, you name it. And so for staking, we have also done a lot of integrations with, we have audited integrations with various staking providers. So what is staking? So very simply, staking is locking your assets, your Ether or whatever native assets you have, in order to get some yield. And this sounds kind of a Ponzi scheme if you describe it like this. So what we're really doing here is you lock your Ether in order to participate in the validation of the network. And this makes the network secure, and that's why you get rewarded. So yeah, I guess that's the simplest way to define staking.
Thank you very much. Erina, tell us about non-custodial staking.
Hi, my name is Erina. I lead corporate strategy at Allnodes. Allnodes is an infranode provider. We work with various protocols. We currently support about 80 of them, and our clients span from exchanges, wallets, custodians, dApps, DEXs, foundations, the list goes on really. So we are a non-custodial staking provider, which means that we don't have access to your private keys, and our clients are not locked in. So we don't lock them into a contract. They're free to go whenever they want. They can download their validator and withdrawal keys from the dashboard when they want to, and we don't keep that from them. So they are free agents. We are just the provider. We're providing them the avenue to stake, but we don't keep custody of their keys.
Wonderful. I would love for Yves to also introduce the term slashing.
All right, first introduce myself. My name is Yves Holenstein with Bitcoin Swiss, responsible for custody and staking. We're like a full-fledged financial services provider doing brokerage, custody, staking, lending, payments, and asset management. And I think the main difference here is that we do only custodial staking. So it's the contrary of what Erina just said. So if somebody wants to participate in staking via us, they have to have custody with us, have to be an on-board client. And regarding slashing, as Ioannis just said, staking is when you provide your assets in order to participate in the validation of a network. And slashing generally is a way to prevent bad behavior. The rules are different for each network, but typically when you behave badly or try to cheat, you get punished by the network, and typically this means you lose some of your assets. And that's an economic incentive to behave properly.
Thank you very much. Raul, last but not least, help us understand restaking.
Thank you very much. Well, first, I introduce myself. My name is Raul. I'm one of the co-founders of the Nectar Network. Nectar Network is a multi-layer restaking network under which we are covering liquid staking and also re-staking. Everything based on DVT, which is distributed validation technology. Starting by the basics, we are not a provider. We produce software so that people can use that software in a permissionless manner. And regarding liquidity staking and real staking, liquidity staking, I will define it as the way of depositing ETH, getting a receipt token, so you have a receipt token that you can use in other platforms or with in other means. And real staking is leveraging the security of the Ethereum network, in this case, to be used to secure other things. So in my mind, the easiest way to describe it most probably is if you want to bootstrap a network and you need nodes, you can tap in the security of Ethereum and use the nodes that are already secure in the Ethereum network to your own network.
Excellent. When we speak about cybersecurity, the first thing that comes to mind is usually private keys. When you speak about cybersecurity in the context of crypto and blockchain, of course. And private keys in the context of staking are involved on multiple layers. We'll start with the private keys that I, as the holder of the assets, have when I want to stake. How do I secure these assets? What are the risks that come with staking to me as the owner of the assets?
I can take that. So yeah, whoever owns the private key for an address, they can make changes on behalf of this address. So the biggest risk is if you lose your key, then you cannot make changes, right? And the question now is, how do you secure your private keys? And actually, there are many ways. I mean, there are many simple ways, like never letting your private keys touch anything that you know can leak it. Or then you can go to, for more involved approaches, like having multisigs, for example. What is this? It's like smart contracts that hold the assets, and in order to make to execute a transaction, multiple people have to sign. And in this way, you can actually prevent from, having a single point of failure, which is essentially the biggest risk in this case. And then I think one of the most recent advances that people haven't really realized its potential yet is account abstraction, which is kind of allows people to. It allows for example, for social recovery. So people don't really create transactions; they don't have to sign them, but they create what we call an intent, and then another party is responsible for creating the transaction on their behalf. I don't know if someone else has to add something.
If there's nothing to add, the second aspect where there are private keys involved is at the validators that are run as an infrastructure by companies such as Erina's and Yves. What are the risks that exist there?
When it comes to private keys?
Yes.
I mean, as Ioannis mentioned, the risks are about losing your private keys. So when you're in a non-custodial situation like us, the client is responsible for managing their private keys. So if they lose them, I mean, that kind of responsibility is on them, right? When it's a custodial solution like Yves, it's completely opposite. So it's just about, as a client, you manage your approach. You figure out, what do you prefer doing? Do you prefer trusting a provider, whether it's a custodial staking provider or a custodian, or do you prefer kind of doing the direct route and working with a non-custodial provider?
Maybe to add on that, the validator, in most protocols, it's always a little bit different in each protocol, but generally, the validator uses the private key to actually sign the blocks with the transactions. So there's two main cases that come to my mind. Either I lose the key, and the validator is no longer able to operate. In most protocols, this means that potentially slashing or other penalties could then happen, but the assets are typically safe because you can usually unstake them still, even though the validator isn't running. The more dangerous part is operationally, if you suddenly, for usually human error, set up the same key twice or multiple times, which means that the network believes you're cheating and trying to double sign transactions, which usually gets punished the most hard way the network can do, typically with brutal slashing. And in order to protect those risks, you typically apply strong process controls for ICXI principles. You oftentimes outsource the keys from the actual validator to a centralized signing device so that it cannot be there more than one time. Or you use new technologies like DVT, distributed validator technology, which also ensures that you cannot have the key multiple times running.
Yeah, maybe to dig a little bit deeper on DVT, as you were mentioning, because it's kind of the core base of our protocol. The way that we are doing it is actually, in basic terms, it splits up the key between different participants, so no a single actor can control a key, and everything is controlled by the protocol itself. So actually,
sorry, can you explain what is DVT? I mean, what do the letters DVT stand for?
Sure, distributed validator technology, and actually is a way to validate or to become an Ethereum operator in this case, or an Ethereum validator in this case, in a distributed manner. So instead of being just myself with 32 ETH and my computer validating, or my whatever equipment I have validating the blocks, what I'm doing is getting together with other people in a permissionless manner, and we are splitting that key between the different participants. So we are having what we call key shares, which is actually a kind of a piece of that key, we can say. We all come together and we validate. So everything is controlled by the protocol itself, and it's not a single actor validating the blocks and controlling everything.
So DVT is addressing the risk of double signing. Yves mentioned, is this also addressing the risk of availability if a validator goes down or is not on the network?
Yes, actually, if you are using DVT, and I have to say this, at least in my mind, is the most resilient way to perform validation duties. In each one of the clusters, at least 2/3 of the cluster needs to be down in order to get slashed. So that makes kind of a big difference. At the end of the day, what you are doing is, and I think it was Ioannis, the one who was mentioning, like one of the biggest risks is having single point of failures. You're avoiding having a single point of failure because you are leveraging the power of a network. I hope it makes sense.
Right. Anything else that came to mind in this topic of really hardcore crypto private key type topics? All right, then we move over to speaking about protocol-specific risks. Because when I look around, many people who are start to be interested in staking, they just look at what staking protocol gives the biggest yield. There's a long list starting with 20 or more % when it's about L1 protocols, going down to 3 to 1% and less. And of course, these different yields come with different risks because each protocol has a slightly different way to implement staking. And we have slashing that Yves and a few people already mentioned, which is implemented differently. Some protocols don't have any slashing. Other protocols only slash the potential rewards. And then finally, there are protocols that even slash the full stake that is at stake, so that you can lose everything that you use for staking. And that's certainly worth considering when you pick a protocol for staking. I'd like to open up the round. Erina, maybe what are things that your clients look at when they pick a protocol for staking?
I mean, I think it also depends how the client identifies risks when it comes to choosing a protocol, right? For someone, the priority is going to be liquidity. For someone, the priority is going to be the slashing risk. Someone is going to be the amount, as you said, the yield. So it kind of depends. Obviously, the risk associated with different protocols is some protocols have slashing, some don't. The bonding period will vary. I mean, we can't tell our clients which protocol to choose, but we can present them with the facts. We can tell them that, you know, with this kind of protocol, you will have this kind of bonding period, you will have this amount of commissions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's up to the client to decide what kind of risk appetite they have. It's up to the client to decide also, you know, how much liquidity they need or working capital they need. Can they wait 2 days for unbonding? Can they wait 21 days for unbonding? Or do they need it, you know, instantaneously? So it's really dependent on how they operate their internal structure, whether they're staking their treasury or they're staking their clients' assets. But yes, protocols are different. They're not all the same. They're not made the same. And that's why different protocols will work for different clients.
Can I just spend a few words on what is a bonding period?
Of course. So the bonding period is a time that is needed to actually to unbond your stake. So when you want to withdraw your assets, you then have to wait a certain period of time before they become available to you.
Yeah, I can add to that. So yeah, as I mentioned, there are also solutions on chain, like Lido, like Rocket Pool, where people can stake their assets and earn some yield. And there are still a lot of risks. And I can just name a couple of them. For example, stakers should always ask, is the technology or the smart contracts, in my case, mature enough to sustain the risk that they're undertaking? Another question people should ask is whether this protocol is centralized enough or not. For example, people stake with Lido, but Lido is an entity, and I think it's a legal entity, even though it's a DAO. So, it's again, we end up in a single point of failure situation, right? Because if Lido is forced to take a decision, then all the people that have staked their assets are essentially forced to follow this decision, even though they might not want to. And this is very important. And sometimes when we're focused, on the yield and the profit, we tend to forget these kinds of risks.
And I think to add to the centralization aspect is we also have permissionless networks. With the permission network, you have a bit less of centralization. There's limited amount of validators who are offering the validation service on the network. So things also up to the client to decide if they want to go with a network that's permissionless or permissioned.
Maybe one more thing regarding how the clients select the protocols is, since we are custodial, we're a financial service provider, so we have a lot of obligations on risk disclosure. So typically, if a client wants to stake with us, he has to sign an additional, let's say, annex to contracts that can be 3-4 pages with like all the risks that are protocol specific per protocol. Which can be a little bit intimidating sometimes, but we really have to show them all the foreseeable risks and the magnitude of them and where he can actually lose a significant portion of his assets. But then on the other hand, we're probably a lot more restrictive than Allnodes, for example, is with the selection of what do we even offer to our clients, because we also have regulatory risks that we have to take into account, so that the protocol is not potentially a security token, etc., etc. So we already do some filtering and are only allowed to offer, let's say, a selection of protocols where some of the risks have been eliminated by us. And there are some risks. You mentioned smart contract risks. There's a protocol, Polygon-Matic, for example, that is actually staking the smart contract in Ethereum. And it's like a chain of 4 or 5 cascaded smart contracts. And sometimes it can get really, really difficult to understand what are the actual risks. So we really dig deep into that risk analysis before we offer something.
You want to add anything?
Oh, sure. No, well, first of all, I have to admire the way that you can reduce the complexity to your clients when you have to explain them something like a Polygon. And secondly, yes, coming back a little bit to what Ioannis was saying again, I think one of the factors that is also important to take into account when we are speaking about risk when staking and within the whole ecosystem is also the market dynamics risk. At the end of the day, you were talking about Lido as an entity, whether it's a DAO or not, but one of the biggest risks that we are facing at different levels, also at the risk-taking level, is the number of participants that are within the market. When, at the end of the day, this is an infrastructure market. So each participant within the market is offering security to the whole ecosystem. And if we are speaking just about Ethereum, when you have some participants or between two participants that can collude and control more than 50% of the market, you're endangering the security of the whole network. So we should be incentivizing market diversity and also taking into account from a risk analysis perspective, what is the market concentration within each different network that we are approaching.
Right. We indiscriminately spoke about protocols, staking protocols like L1, L2 protocols in the blockchain space, and also more smart contract-based staking protocols. And there's probably also a risk difference in between the two, one that's baked into a base protocol and the other one that is added as a smart contract on top. And I would ask you, Ioannis, if you have anything to add when you audit these kind of smart contracts, or maybe you've also audited a base layer protocol, what are the kind of things you specifically look for?
I mean, usually the issues relate to, to the underlying logic and how well it complies to the specification. And for example, when we're talking about staking on Ethereum, the staking is very well specified. But actually, when people implement solutions that make use of staking, they make mistakes because exactly they haven't fully understood the specification well enough. So, one of the things we check is this, and then of course, then there are always blind spots. I mean, it's code that it's been written by humans, and humans unfortunately make mistakes. So we always have to take care of this kind of issues.
All right, anything to add?
Yeah, maybe I'm jumping a little bit on the next points or not, but I just wanted to say that on the sense that Ioannis was mentioning and what Yves and Erina has just said, I really want to to pay my respect to, especially to Yves and Erina, because I think that's something that everybody needs to understand is the enormous complexity of explaining, especially then that have to deal with third-party clients and third-party that are trying to get into the market, even if they are specialized within virtual assets or crypto assets, the enormous tax that they have in explaining that to someone who may not be that familiar with the market. In a previous life, I used to engage with investment, firms and investment terms, and I remember that just to explain a plain vanilla investment to a prospective investor, it was 50-page summaries, documents, and everything. So the way that they have to deal with these complex structures and complex infrastructures is, the challenge that they have and the way that they are handling that is impressive.
I think the fun starts is when the client understands what vanilla staking is, and then you have the restaking, liquid staking, all the other additions adding on. They're like, we thought we understood this, but we don't now.
That was actually a nice segue over, Raul. Thank you to the next part today. But let me take a step back. Many protocols, especially Ethereum, have it in their ethos to encourage self-staking. Basically coming from the be your own bank and not trust any intermediaries ethos that's very heavy in crypto. But of course, not all protocols have staking requirements in a way that make it easy for just anyone to be their own staking providers. And that's why we see many third-party providers out there, such as Allnodes and Bitcoin Swiss. And when you as a person or as a person working in a company want to pick such a service provider for your staking needs, what are the kind of frameworks that are in place to do this in a way that's repeatable, that's understandable? How do people assess the quality and security of third-party staking providers? You want to have a go, Yves?
Yeah, I would say there's some basics that you maybe just look at your potential provider, how long it's been around, what's customer base, do some secondary research, is there any bad news about them, etc. But then more recently, there has been like a secondary industry that has developed around this. There are websites like Staking Rewards, Staked.network, and Beacon Chain, for example, that start listing staking providers, rating them, Some of them, like staking rewards, start with certifications for those providers. So that's one way how you can identify maybe the more reputable ones. But then if you go one layer down, as a provider ourselves, we have to manage our operational risks as well, and it's always easier if you can follow a framework. And there Lido has been really, really helpful. There's been a group of Lido operators, and then let's say entities close to them like us supporting that created a framework called the DUC framework, which is basically a risk assessment and mitigation framework building on the typical standards in risk management, and helping basically players like us to structure the way how we want to make sure we reduce the risks. And then there's other players like Alluvial, which is a liquid staking provider for compliant liquid staking, which means KYC liquid staking. They work together with Pricewaterhouse to create the framework, etc. So there's more and more developing in this area where, on the one hand, the client can leverage them to select a vendor, and the vendor, like us, can use it to improve their maturity and eventually get audited on that.
How do you actually do this in practice, Erina?
I mean, for us, also we suggest that clients look at the history, as Yves said, performance, uptime of validators, how they structure their product, look at their tech stack, look at their, if it's hardware, is it software, is it a cloud storage? I mean, there are multiple points you have to analyze when deciding who to work with. And again, look at what is a priority to you. Look what jurisdictions are covered. If you are in the States or you're in Europe or in Asia, look where the hardware is set up to minimize latency, to improve uptime, to improve the performance. Multiple factors go into account.
Let's switch the perspective maybe and look at how do all nodes instill trust in their clients. That they use frameworks or don't use frameworks, establish frameworks. What are the key points that you bring to the table?
I mean, instilling trust comes from obviously providing a good service, a good product, and listening to your clients. And I think we base a lot of our product development on feedback. It's quite simple. We talk to our clients both on the retail and institutional side because we have two segments. We listen to what they're saying, what they're demanding, what they're asking, what problems they're encountering. Some of the things that we offer, which I think is unique to all nodes, is running our own data centers. We have multiple data centers set up across the world where we don't rent them, we don't lease them, we actually physically own them. That adds to the security aspect, to the privacy aspect. We have more control over the data centers and really specializing in the custom solutions. I mean, yes, staking is one of our products, and we have a lot of other node infra products, but focusing on staking, I think that having unique things that differentiate yourself from other providers kind of gives you that leg up.
Right, maybe back to Yves. How do you, a big Swiss, tackle the challenge?
It's mainly we're profiting from the history and the reputation right now, but we are working on now implementing those frameworks that I just mentioned. We're not there yet, and then eventually we want to get audited. And then add slashing insurance as one example, but in our opinion it makes more sense after we have been audited. We naturally can negotiate better rates. So that's the way we want to no longer rely on history, because clients get more professional as well. So while the name was good enough until maybe a year or two ago, nowadays the clients have auditors, they want to see something, etc. So we also have to go with the flow and get more formally mature.
Right, anything to add from you, Ioannis, Raul? All right, yeah, we have more topics to go through, that's perfect. And actually I would love to dive a little bit deeper into liquid staking and restaking. Raul only touched on this very lightly at the beginning. I asked him to cut it short, but it's quite a complex topic. And I don't think that short intro did it full justice. So let's have another go. Slightly deeper, slightly more time, Raul. I think there's quite a few people in the audience who would love to understand and walk away from this today saying, now I know what restaking is.
I don't really know if I know what risk-taking is fully. I mean, no, I mean, it's a relatively new thing at the end of the day, risk-taking. Just to give you an idea, there isn't yet a fully functional agent in the market. I mean, at the end of the day, the lead within risk-taking has been EigenLayer, and even EigenLayer hasn't implemented yet slashing and all the functionalities that they were promising. They are rolling gradually. Just to give you a sense of what is the status of the technology at this stage. And what is basically risk-taking? In order to put it in simple terms, in staking, what you are doing is securing a network through value, depositing your ETH and your crypto assets within that network in order to secure that you are not behaving in a way that you shouldn't behave. Risk-taking, in simple terms, is just, okay, that asset that I'm putting in this network to secure that I'm behaving in a certain way, I'm going to reuse that asset to secure other things. So I have other things. EigenLayer call them AVSs. I think it's a nice term as well, and we use them as well.
What does AVS stand for?
AVS stands for Active Validation Services, and actually it's an extremely broad term. An AVS, in my mind, is anyone who wants to bootstrap a new network, because it can be almost anything. And anyone that wants to bootstrap a new network, instead of, okay, setting its own set of incentives, or, well, it sets its own sets of incentives, but instead of starting from zero, trying to attract people with their computers and with equipment in order to start securing that new network, what these AVS are doing is, okay, let's try to reuse the people, the agents that are securing other networks, in this case, Ethereum. And but there is also risk-taking in Bitcoin, by the way. And these people, these AVSs, what they are doing is tap into that security. So what they are saying is, okay, I'm going to give you these incentives if you start performing additional duties towards my network. And if you don't perform the way that I want, and you start behaving on a different way, maybe because you are focusing just on the other network and you are performing the task, I'm going to slash you and to penalize you in the network where you have those assets deposited. That is extremely positive from an economic point of view, because you are having the same asset securing different things. So obviously, the economics increase is somehow leveraging the value of the asset that you have in that initial network, but it also poses certain risks because you can create cascade effects. So if you have multiple AVSs and everything starts to fail, and they start slashing the operators within the primary chain, actually they will be penalized, and that chain will be affected by something that at the end of the day is alien to end.
Of course, people would love to understand what risk-taking is, because they want to assess whether the risks that come with the high yield of risk-taking is worth the risks that they take. And maybe that's something we can spend a few more minutes on before we come to the Q&A at the end.
I want to point something else first. So yeah, we're talking about the immediate risks of risk-taking, and indeed this leveraging, these cascading effects is a big risk, but I think there's a bigger risk we don't really talk about. And as Markus mentioned before, the Ethereum ethos is do-it-yourself, right? And unfortunately, it looks like with risk-taking, the barrier or the threshold, the technological threshold that someone has to overcome in order to participate in risk-taking is higher. And this means it's even harder for someone, for a simple, person to use their ether to get the maximum yield. And what happens then? Then people will turn to various services in order, to get the maximum yield out of their ether. And this will eventually lead to centralization, or could potentially lead to centralization. And then you end up, totally contradicting, to the ethos of Ethereum, which is focus on censorship resistance. Because if you have only a few players who really, participate in the network because they do the staking and they participate in all AVSs, then essentially you end up in an Ethereum which is, consists of way less players than what we are used to. And I think this is a big risk we are not really talking about today.
All right, so there's not only risks to people who stake and service provider who do staking, but also to the ecosystem and the protocol,
which is the people
that can be encouraged
again, right?
by certain developments, right?
Exactly.
Sure, so what kind of risk appetite is needed to do restaking today? Who are people doing restaking?
Let's divide it into sides. From the staking side, obviously anybody who wants to get a higher yield and have a higher risk profile. Because at the end of the day, even in basic terms, I think everybody can understand that you are posing yourself not just to the risk of one chain, but to several agents that can produce slashing and can damage your, that assets that you are staking. And on the operator side, on the not operator side, I think maybe Yves and
Irina, I'm going to ask that. That's a good segue. So your clients, Irina, your clients, Yves, are these the kind of risk takers who want to participate in risk taking today?
I think it's really early to tell. I think right now, obviously, the first clients we're going to be adopting restaking is the retail segment on our side. They have a bit of a larger risk appetite. They are willing to maybe kind of play around and see how it works. Institutions on our end, what we're saying, are curious, obviously. They're observing, but they are not interacting with the product just yet. They're waiting to see how it's going to work. But I think that institutions are usually the last ones to adopt a product that is new.
We have some very crypto-native clients. Also, the institutions are typically whales that just turned into institutions. They're really open for risk, but we are not. So we just observe the whole topic because I think nobody really understands all that cascaded risks that you guys have mentioned. And maybe we'll look into it a little bit closer towards the end of the year, but until now we observe.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. I would like to advertise the Cybersecurity Working Group of the Crypto Valley Association that is meeting monthly and having these kind of conversations every month. We have an expert come in and present a topic that they are working on or that they researched to share information within the community. Everyone and anyone is welcome to join, whether that's deep experts who can contribute and challenge each other and learn from each other, or newcomers and people who would like to learn and challenge their knowledge and become more knowledgeable in the space. Please sign up through the CVA, the Crypto Valley Association website, or approach one of us directly. We also have a Telegram chat where we share relevant information, keep up to date on hacks, security developments, changes in risk profiles of protocols. So that's a good way to stay in touch with the topic. And now we have not too much time left for questions, but let me see if there's appetite for one or two questions. Please.
Hi, Ralph from Brick Towers. We're a Swiss non-custodial staking provider, so similar to Allnodes, which is of course much bigger. So I have a very general question for actually maybe Yves and Irina. Do you think that if there is over time a concentration on the bigger staking providers, on the non-custodial staking providers that take over like the vast majority of the staking percentage, even though the risk is of course declining, not from an asset perspective with the staking provider, that this yields also to a bit of a centralization risk in terms of the Ethereum protocol, or do you think you can get as much market share as you like and there's no risk involved with that?
I'll let you answer first.
It's a very loaded.
So.
No, it's a very loaded question. So you're asking, there are like many steps there. I'm trying to keep track. So you're asking pretty much what's going to happen if, let's say, a validator has a larger market share of the stake, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if the client is coming to us and they're saying that, we want to bring you our assets to stake, we're not going to say no to them. But we have before taken measures where we've seen that we are now getting close to a larger market share, and we've increased, for example, our fees in order to discourage clients, retail clients especially, from coming to us and maybe going on their validator. Now, that does not happen very often. We've done that maybe once or twice in our kind of history. At the end of the day, we believe that it's up to the protocol to make sure that there is decentralization, and as I mentioned, with either permission or permissionless way. I mean, at the end of the day, for us, we are providing a service, we're serving customers, and we're providing an avenue to staking. Unless, I don't know, you guys do it differently.
No, and we're way too small, so I mean, we're number 4 in custodial business, but still we're way too small. So looking at Ethereum, for example, there's about 1 million validators times 32 ETH. That's a lot of money. So it gets dangerous the moment you have 33% of the network, in the case of Ethereum, that would fail or be manipulated, because from that moment on you can prevent finalization of the network. There's the biggest one around is Coinbase with 11-12%, but around Lido, this discussion has actually sparked last year quite significantly, because Lido was above 30%, and there was some fears that even though you have around 30 providers within Lido, in theory, Lido themselves control what those providers are doing, because they control the smart contract, so there could be a certain attack vector. That has been very much addressed by the community, I would say, and that there's awareness for that, and it's like almost a self-control. So Lido has been really attacked, that they have to take care. Other protocols may be a lot more concentrated where this risk is bigger.
And I think for us also, I mean, we are wary when we are providing a white label solution to other validators, for example. If we have multiple validators on our network, that's when we are paying attention to, I mean, how much of the share that we have.
Thank you, Ralph, for the great question. Apologies, everyone else. There's no more time for more questions with the time that these people take in answering them. But we are going to be around. Join us for lunch outside and ask more questions. We're happy to talk. And please join the Cybersecurity Working Group.